Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of the 2022 Higher Education Climate Leadership Summit. My name is Nicole Tirico. I'm a program director at the Intentional Endowments Network, and I'm very happy to welcome you to our closing keynote. So following our land acknowledgement statement at the opening of the summit, we'd like to again recognize the long-standing history of colonialism that has brought us to reside on Indigenous lands and reflect on our place within that history. We've shared the link to our land acknowledgement resource page in the chat so you can learn more about our journey and the actions we're taking to meaningfully support Indigenous communities across our organizations. With that in mind, I acknowledge that I'm joining you all today from Western Massachusetts, the ancestral homelands of the Mohican people, who are the Indigenous people of this land. And I invite the speakers of this session, as well as our participants, to, as you introduce yourselves, kindly state the land that you're calling in from. And I also want to let you all know that we have set aside time at the end of this session for audience Q&A. So as our speakers are presenting and connecting with each other, please do add questions and upvote them in the Q&A section of the platform. And we'll keep an eye on this feature and bring in your questions as we can at the end of the session. So at this time, I'm honored to introduce Lynn Mahoney, the president of San Francisco State University, who unfortunately had a scheduling conflict and isn't able to join us live, but kindly recorded a video introduction, which we will now share. And following President Mahoney's remarks, our speakers will dive into this fireside chat. So with that, thank you, and let's hear from President Mahoney.
Mahoney, president of San Francisco State University, a proud host institution for the Higher Ed Leaders Climate Summit. San Francisco State, its students and alumni share with all here a commitment to addressing the climate crisis. We are proud of our history of leadership in sustainable investing. In 2013, we were the first public university and the first school on the West Coast whose foundation divested from coal and tar sands as a first step towards full fossil fuel divestment. We were also among the first institutions to establish a student sustainable investment fund, allowing a class open to majors from across the university to apply sustainable investing principles in a real-world context. Later this year, our university foundation will approve a revised investment policy statement that includes bold and measurable commitments to attaining net zero emissions and advancing racial equity. Our faculty are leading the way in providing the academic opportunities our students so urgently seek to equip themselves to address the climate crisis. This past fall, we launched a climate change certificate, the first in the California State University system. The 12 to 18 unit certificate program is designed to give students a foundational understanding of the causes, effects, and mitigations of climate change, so that they can take action in their communities. But our students and San Francisco State have even greater ambitions and are compelled by a deep sense of urgency to do more. We hope to announce additional curricular initiatives later this spring that will address the profound need for climate leaders from underrepresented backgrounds, as it is our most marginalized communities that continue to bear the brunt of climate change. Our alumni share this commitment to sustainability and transformative action. It is my great pleasure today to introduce one. Successful entrepreneur, Chris Larson. Chris earned his bachelor's degree in accounting and business administration at San Francisco State and an MBA from Stanford University. Chris built a career on boldly pursuing transformative business ideas and is the co-founder and CEO of several innovative companies, including eLoan, where he focused on democratizing lending and finance. As co-founder of Ripple, Chris became a trailblazer in blockchain, creating a global decentralized network that uses the digital asset XRP to facilitate payments across boundaries and financial systems. In 2015, Chris and Doug Galen co-founded RippleWorks, a nonprofit foundation that supports high-growth social ventures around the world. In 2019, Chris, his wife, Lena Lamb, and RippleWorks made a transformational gift to San Francisco State. Their gift supports learning opportunities for diverse students in business innovation, global enterprise, fintech, and entrepreneurship. Chris's transformational support of both San Francisco State's Lamb Family College of Business and the fight against global change serves as an inspiration to our current and future alumni, many of whom will be students in our new climate-focused programs. As a proud San Francisco State alum, Chris embodies the values of our university, where students, faculty, and staff have long championed the causes of environmental sustainability, social justice, and racial equity. In that same spirit, Chris has shown that he recognizes the importance of scanning the horizon for opportunities, including today's topic of discussion, encouraging the crypto and digital currencies sector's responsibilities for fighting climate change, and through his creation of a private foundation to back companies, projects, and technologies with ideas to significantly help the fight against climate change. Joining Chris in this keynote conversation is Fenny Wang, a lawyer and entrepreneur in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Fenny is the founder of Humanity Cash, whose mission is to create a circular economy powered by universal basic income and community currencies, which ensure that every dollar strengthens local economies. As the founder of Dionysus Labs, a legal and technology consultancy, she has worked with organizations like the Red Cross and the United Nations Development Program on the application of blockchain to humanitarian causes. Other projects have focused on digital identity and credentials for high school students, social media and digital identity, and developing the concept of community digital currencies. Fenny developed a deep knowledge of blockchain technology, particularly in the decentralized finance space, as Associate General Counsel at Maker DAO, Head of Strategy at Bancorp, and as co-founder of ICSO, a blockchain for social impact measurement. In her previous life, she was a lawyer at international law firms in New York and London, practicing securities enforcement and capital markets. She started her career as a research analyst covering corporate bond markets at JP Morgan. Fenny received her law degree from Columbia University and her undergraduate degrees from the University of California, Berkeley. I join you in looking forward to this session and hearing Fenny and Chris's views on the intersection of digital currencies and environmental and social issues. Please join me in welcoming Chris Larson and Fenny Wang.
Hey, everybody. I guess I'm starting out. We're going to do a little bit of a conversation here, with maybe a little bit of a different format. But first of all, really want to thank the president for that incredible introduction. And in the spirit of this conference, I am calling in today from Marin County, just north of San Francisco. And this is originally Miwok lands. So first of all, I want to turn over to Fenny. And Fenny, I really want to hear about your amazing organization. You guys are doing some incredible stuff. But before that, I think just to level set, maybe you could help us understand kind of, what's really going on here with this whole blockchain movement, cryptocurrencies and digital assets and all the other things now that are spilling out of that. If you could maybe just give us a high level, that would be great.
Sure. So if we start from the basics, what exactly is a blockchain? At its very, very core, a blockchain is a ledger for transactions. Now, typically, when you have a ledger, you have one central authority or a clearinghouse that can see all the transactions coming in, can settle all the transactions, and then it has a state of the ledger that it maintains. The idea of a blockchain is to say, well, what if multiple parties could serve in that role of validating those transactions? And the benefit of doing that is it allows us to have peer-to-peer transactions. So there's more fluidity or liquidity for our transactions and potentially lower cost because the central validator of a network or a ledger, they tend to charge a bit of a toll for doing that service, and it has a monopoly role in providing that kind of service. So that's one benefit. And the other benefit is that perhaps it might be more censorship resistant to have multiple parties maintaining the state of a ledger rather than just one party. But now, how do you actually do that when you have multiple parties? Because you need to be in agreement about what the state of that ledger is, and you should ensure that the transactions are all valid and that we don't have two transactions competing essentially for the same amount of money, in which we would have an issue around double spending. So that's the core of the computer science that a blockchain network is looking to solve. If we have multiple people trying to validate transactions, they need to have some way of agreeing on what are valid transactions and what is the correct state. So that's something called a consensus algorithm, and that will be important later when we talk about some of the energy issues around blockchain networks themselves, because every consensus algorithm will have a different method for determining how transactions are valid, and that those who are validating transactions aren't secretly trying to cheat the system and, for example, mint themselves extra money. So that's where a lot of the different designs can impact whether it's the use of energy or some other factor that can help prevent people from malicious actions, and also to be in agreement about what the state of the blockchain is. So the most common blockchains that we see today are called public blockchains, meaning anyone can read transactions that occur on that blockchain network, and anyone can also validate and write new transactions to the ledger and add appendages or and add blocks to that blockchain ledger to see that this is where we end. How do we end up where we are with the current state of the network? So there's that clear trail of all the transactions that lead to the current state of the system. So in order to also incentivize people to do this work of validating the ledger, there needs to be some kind of endogenous incentive, and this is where cryptocurrencies come in originally, is creating an incentive that you earn for validating the transactions correctly. So this then compensates for that kind of time and effort to ensure that the network is live and running and accurate. And so that's really the original birth. For example, when you look at the Bitcoin blockchain, Bitcoin is the reward to the validators or the miners that are ensuring that transactions on that network are correct. And then on top of that, you have now all kinds of different protocols and activities, and they can issue also their own digital currencies or digital assets that represent different things. So you could run a business application, for example, on top of a blockchain network that has its own cryptocurrency that is meant to incentivize participation in that particular application. But other types of digital currencies or digital assets can actually represent something happening in the real world. So carbon credits are really exciting about that because they can also be a digital asset where the data and the history and the origin are also recorded on a blockchain ledger instead of in an Excel spreadsheet. So it improves the transparency of where that asset came from, and also can improve the liquidity of being able to create incentives and markets around carbon credits. So that's also something that is kind of exciting about the digital currency space and with climate change specifically. So I'll stop there. Chris has other questions, follow-on questions for that.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great summary. So thank you so much for that. And I think the way this all goes, I guess I turn this back over to you then at this point.
Yes. So I mean, and I think as a segue, Chris, you've done a lot of thought leadership and work around how do we lessen the environmental impact in the cryptocurrency space. So could you speak to the work that you've done and some of what you're hoping to advocate for as changes within the ecosystem?
Yeah, so I probably spend 3/4 of my time now on climate change issues broadly, just a whole bunch of different projects. And that's kind of the nature of climate. It's like 1,000 little battles, big battles all over the place. And it's important, right? The new IPCC report just came out this morning, again, says that, hey, we've got to cut global emissions 50% by 2030. So that's a Herculean task. So we've got to look everywhere. So clearly, cryptocurrencies and blockchain, they are not the majority of the problem, but they've reached a level now where they're a concern. And if this trend continues, it will be a potentially a major source of the problem, going kind of in the wrong direction. But kind of to level set a little bit, not all of the blockchain industry has the power issue, right? In fact, of the top 10 cryptocurrency and blockchain protocols, 7 of them now are very low energy to carbon neutral. And then I'm excluding 2 more because those are stable coins. That's a whole different topic. We'll just put that aside here. But with, as you know, Ethereum now, the second biggest cryptocurrency by market cap, is in the process of switching from a pretty high energy use technology to one that will cut its energy use 99.9%. Probably makes that move this summer, best estimates, right? So what that will mean, that will leave Bitcoin as being sort of the outlier in that it's using this method to what you just discussed, proof of work, which really the way proof of work does not have to be designed this way, but the way it was designed, it's incenting kind of maximum use of energy. And that is the heart of the problem here. And the scale we're talking about now, Bitcoin now is chewing up about 130 trillion watt hours per year of electricity, puts it on the scale of Sweden. But more alarming, and not just the energy, but about 60 megatons of CO2. That's, orders of magnitude more than Tesla, for example, saves per year. I think a year ago, Tesla was saving about 3.5 megatons of CO2. So of all the attention that company gets, rightly so, 60 megatons is a lot that should be getting our attention as well. But the more alarming thing is the trend lines. Bitcoin's energy usage is up 10x in 5 years. That's very alarming. If you continued on that path for the next 5 years as similar growth, you'd be looking at electricity consumption on par with Japan. That's a big number. And this isn't really just about using renewables, because we need renewables for things you can't eliminate, right? And you can eliminate that energy use, as Ethereum is proving, right? And switching to this other method called proof of stake. Now, should Bitcoin move to proof of stake? I don't think that's a requirement. So, and in fact, as you know, in the Bitcoin community does not like proof of stake. They like what they're doing, right? And look, I get it. The Bitcoin community should be very proud. I mean, Bitcoin, whether you like this or not, has probably been one of the best performing assets of all time in the history of the world, right? It has made so many people, incredibly wealthy, including people that started out with very little or nothing, And I know there's controversy around concentration and all that among the entire industry. I get it, but it's been incredibly successful. So that makes the people in that community, not really be all that big of fans of change. That's just, I get it. That's human nature. And people in the Bitcoin community would say that, look, the proof of work system we have is the secret sauce. That is the most secure, the most censorship resistant. So there's going to be resistance. And believe me, we started this campaign along with Greenpeace. The campaign that we started last week is called Change the Code, Not the Climate. The idea we're saying here is that, look, you have to reduce the energy footprint of cryptocurrencies, which is primarily now Bitcoin. And it's not about using renewables. It's about changing the code like we've seen with most of the other entrants, so that you get to a very low energy, low carbon emission, system. You can do that, but it is more a political problem than it is a technology problem, right? Yes. Again, this resistance. But here's what I would say speaking to the Bitcoin people that hate, look, when you launch a campaign like that, do not go to social media because, it's going to be ugly. And it is, and I get it. But look at it this way. If you have a system that is incenting, and this is tied to price, right? The higher the price goes, the more energy you're using. That's why you've seen that explosion over the last 5 years, because Bitcoin prices exploded over the last 5 years, last 10 years. And I think there's no reason to think that stops. Everybody who says it's not going to continue has been wrong. Some of the smartest people in the world. So it is likely to continue. So here's where the problem is. You're in a world that's going backward in some ways, not kind of keeping up with where we have to be with the IPCC. We're falling behind. Almost certainly climate's going to get worse. I'm here in Miwok lands and, beautiful redwoods all over. I want these redwoods to be here. And the problem we've had in California, we lost 1.5 million acres just last year, all-time record from a previous record of over 1 million the year before. This is going to get bad. So if you're sitting on an asset where the world is going down this climate disaster, and even if your asset price is going up, you're going to wake up one morning and you're going to go, awesome, this asset just increased tremendously. This is so great. I'm so wealthy. Oh, but now the climate is worse, right? Or somehow I'm responsible. Or your friends are asking, what are you doing about climate? And you're sitting there going, well, I'm making a ton of money on this thing, but I know this is the wrong answer. That's a problem, right? So I think for the Bitcoin community, how is that not going to get worse? How is that not going to reach a point where people are so mad, right? These communities are so mad that they're putting on pressure on these companies that are providing liquidity. That is sure going to lead to a point where Bitcoin is weaker than, let's say, Ethereum. And that should be a concern, even if you're not thinking about climate. Let's flip that around. The one thing that Bitcoin has that no other crypto has, it's got this incredible mining infrastructure, which, by the way, should be case studies in business. Because China shut down mining last year, these miners moved 65% of the world's mining to the US in 6 months, where now the US went from single-digit mining capacity to about 45% and growing, right? So the story is Bitcoin mining is here. But what are we seeing? We're seeing coal plants in Kentucky being fired up to mine Bitcoin. You're seeing waste coal, the worst possible coal to be using, fired up in Pennsylvania. New York, you're seeing gas plants being repurposed. And that is making those local communities just outraged. And they are going to these corporations and liquidity providers. So that is an unstable situation that's only going to get worse. But again, they have that mining infrastructure. What if you turn that mining infrastructure around and you change the code to instead of incenting energy burning, what if it was able to incent removing carbon from the atmosphere, or maybe just producing renewable energy and pumping that back into the grid instead of taking it from the grid? Now you have a situation where people are waking up and going, oh my God, I made all this money on this asset. Oh, and you know what? Every time the price goes up, I'm sucking more carbon out of the atmosphere. I'm helping. You would have everybody on the planet, adding Bitcoin in ownership into their climate plans. And I think it would be an unstoppable asset. So what I'm hopeful is the Bitcoin people and community will see the risk that if they don't stop, you're going to hit a wall, and also see the unusual situation they and only they have to turn this thing around and figure out a code change. And look, I don't have the answer on that. It's going to be hard because you got to get to the heart of right now. All you have to do is proof of work. You don't have to really prove you did the work. It's just the result proves you did the work. Mathematical, beautiful. Right. I get it. But I got to believe all the geniuses out there, all the incredible capital out there. It's a worldwide phenomenon. You're telling me that nobody can come up with a better answer than an anonymous person did 13 years ago when there was no industry? I don't buy it. So what we got to do is start rolling up our sleeves. And that's kind of what this campaign is all about. Change the code, not the climate. Okay, right. I'll stop. I know I'm kind of going on too long here. I'll go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I think personally what will happen is there'll be a new blockchain that addresses those issues because the people involved will have those intentions from the outset. But then the question is, what do we do about the legacy, Bitcoin folks who don't want to make those changes because there's a lot of philosophical viewpoints. So then what do we do, right, about that issue if they're not willing to change that? And so that's a bit worrisome. But Chris, can you speak a bit more about your work in that space, especially with Ripple and your other initiatives?
Sure. So, in our view, this whole blockchain movement, cryptocurrencies, we think these are essential technologies, fundamentally new things that the world hasn't seen before. Certainly a lot of nonsense out there, a lot of bad stuff, totally get it. But there's some fundamental things now that can be done that couldn't be done before. And we think the biggest one of those is this notion of, we've had an internet of information where data flows freely, globally, interoperable way that has completely changed the world, right? And created this Cambrian explosion of new information companies, all the things that we do every single day. You really haven't had that when it has come to money and value. It's just a different beast. And until now, we all know trying to wire money cross border. I mean, I've had wires from the U.S. to Canada take 10 days. I mean, come on, how is that possible in today's world? And it's just the system we have of moving value around Earth is incredibly antiquated. It's built on 70s technology, whether it be SWIFT, correspondent banking. It's a mess, and that's holding back billions of people from participating fully in the global economy, which I think leads to all kinds of bad social outcomes. What blockchain and crypto really represents is an internet of value, where money and value and assets now can move like information instantly anywhere in the world, complete interoperability at essentially extremely low cost. So now we can build applications on top of that are viable businesses. Banks couldn't make money serving those 2 billion people in the world, right? They just couldn't make money, and that's why they didn't serve them, right? And the idea now is with blockchain, cryptocurrency, digital assets, new businesses, applications can have viable services to everybody on the planet. And we think that's a total game changer. And I think what will come of that is this Cambrian explosion of everybody being able to participate fully in the global economy. So that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build replacements for cross-border payments that will replace SWIFT and correspondent banking, making payments instant, basically free, so that others can build on top of that, and completely global. And that's going extremely well. We got about 500 people in the company. We got 10 offices all around the world. That's about a $10 billion run rate, doubled last year. Just the growth has been staggering. And we're really excited about that use case. Other use cases that we're doing, that's called RippleNet. Other things we're doing called RippleX is kind of everything else, right? So the NFTs and DeFi, decentralized finance, some of the work around decentralized autonomous organizations. I know you know a ton about. But we're really bullish, particularly on the NFT area. We think that represents this notion of tokenization of all things on planet Earth. That all things now become extremely easy to move around. Again, it's like the freeing of information, it's the freeing of value. And with that, I think we'll have broad consequences across the world, whether it be business use cases, sustainability, helping out the global South, for example. So we're really excited. There's almost too much to do, so it's a fun time.
Yeah, I just had a thought. What if we had a blockchain where it was proof of stake, but you were staking carbon credits? So then it incentivizes the market for removing carbon from the environment, and it would be a way then to put that back into a blockchain context. So.
Had you ever read the Ministry of the Future, by the way? Have you read that book where they talk about carbon coin and all that?
A lot of friends have mentioned that book, but I haven't read it personally myself yet.
It's pretty interesting, but I think you're exactly right. I mean, this is all about code that incentivizes the right behavior, right? And I think you're seeing tons of great stuff, right? And then there's some things we gotta sort of fix. And again, nothing against Bitcoin. We're Bitcoin fans. But the incentives in the current code are incenting the wrong thing when you talk about climate. And so if you just flip that, oh man, that would be so good, right? But anyway, I appreciate that question, and kind of wanted to turn around to you as well. Now I'm just dying to hear about Humanity Cash and all the great things you're doing there. You've kind of strung together a fascinating kind of group of technologies and vision about how to help communities and people. So we just love to hear about your vision and the things that you actually, think are key in this industry.
Yes, so Humanity Cash, what we're doing is building a platform that allows any community to be able to issue their own community currency with their local banks. And so just to step back, and what is a community currency? The concept of a community currency has been around for quite some time. So back in the 1800s, in the era of free banking, before you had the Federal Reserve, the local banks would know you've got a certain amount of collateral, you've got wheat, you've got something, other commodity that's valuable, so they would issue you a note. And that note can recirculate amongst people because in that local community, people can trust that particular local bank, knowing that, if they say this is good for something, we can recirculate based on that based on their trust. And then during times of stress, community currencies can also be a way of ensuring that movement of goods and services don't stop, but they continue to flow in a community to provide for people even when dollars are scarce. So you saw that happen during the Great Depression. You saw that happen in the Weimar Republic when the whole economy crashed as a result of war. In a more modern times, in peace times, in developed economies, the concept of community currencies, well, how do we keep wealth local? One of the nice things of having a national currency that is a global currency like the US dollar is that you have great liquidity, but the flip side of that is money can go anywhere. So I could live here in Massachusetts, in New York, but I'm spending my money outside of the community. I'm buying from Amazon, so the value of my demand doesn't benefit that local economy, and we don't have good local supply chains as a result. So what community currencies try to do is really to tie monetary instruments back to productive capacities of local economies. Because if I just spend something one time with a store, and then they have to cash it out to US dollar, it doesn't really function like a currency. But if the store can turn around and take the community currency and pay a local supplier, and then the supplier can pay an employee, now you have something that starts to move a bit more like a currency. And so that's really the goal, is how do we have more resilient local economies, which I think overall is also very positive for climate as well. So one of the things that we're looking to do to incentivize people to use a community currency is that the act of paying local and spending local is itself a carbon offset, because you're going to have fewer food miles, for example, you're going to have fewer transportation miles, getting your goods delivered compared to Amazon. And so that behavior itself could generate, for example, a carbon offset. So the typical way that credit card companies might incentivize users is through cashbacks and so forth, which is really coming out of the pockets of small business owners. So when we talked about also payment networks before, when you have monopolies of payment networks, such as Visa and MasterCard, they can charge a lot, right? They're the toll, so you don't have a choice but to pay that toll. So those fees can really add up for local businesses. And now what we've done is create a community currency on the blockchain for the Berkshires region of Massachusetts. Their local currency is called Berkshires, and it's really the first to have this kind of locally controlled payment instrument. The US dollar reserves are held by local banks that reinvest that money back into their local community, small business loans, farm loans, compared to big banks, where very little of the money gets reinvested back into a local community. And then, of course, you don't have to go through the Visa and MasterCard network, so you can save your business owners on those interchange fees. And what we're looking to do is to also show how the programmability of money, which is really exciting to me. The programmability of money can allow us to be more nimble with how we think about cash transfer policies and fiscal stimulus policies. What if we could put some of our PPP money, for example, when we had the PPP loans, what if that was delivered as a local currency? So more of that money would reach Main Street. And therefore, you create more economic multiplier impacts compared to having money go to larger corporations that don't recirculate money as fast. So those are the kinds of experiments that we're running, and we're really excited about what the implications could be also on a national level.
And is that where the UBI comes into play?
Yes. Yes, yeah. So the experiment that we're looking to run with MIT is to test what is the economic multiplier impact when money is situated locally. So I can give someone $1, but if they spend it at an Amazon or a Walmart, that money leaves the community. But if I spend that dollar with the corner bodega or the corner supermarket or the food co-op, that money is more likely to be recirculated back to the local community to pay local suppliers, employees, et cetera. And so the same dollar is now helping multiple parties. And ultimately what that can mean is that it makes UBI cheaper for the taxpayer, because you're actually generating more economic activity. and therefore also more tax receipts as well. So it's another way to think about these kinds of policies.
That's great. Awesome. Let's see, and I guess we are probably at our
Yes.
Q&A point here, right? So
yes, yes, we have 10 minutes for Q&A.
Great. I think, was somebody going to come?
Oh, yes, here we go.
Perfect. Thank you both so much for these enlightening remarks, and to those that have entered questions in the chat. We have about 10 minutes here to dive into some of these great questions. So to start us off, one for both of you, given that this is the Higher Education Climate Leadership Summit, what role could you each see higher education having to encourage the crypto transition to lower zero carbon?
Yeah. Well, if I go ahead and start here, but this is so key for the younger generation, for universities to really step in here. So far, I mean, the whole industry kind of started out this kind of libertarian dream, and look, nothing against libertarianism, but libertarians don't make great community members. These are public blockchains, right? This is not Facebook or Google. Nothing against Google, Facebook. Maybe I won't even comment on that, but it belongs to everybody. Everybody has access to these things. That's the beauty of them. Any developer can build on top of them. But I think further than that, anybody should be able to propose a change. These are not locked in this notion of like core developers. And you'll hear that term sometimes, a core developer of Bitcoin, for example. Again, not to pick on the Bitcoin folks, but that's not the right way to look at it. If these are truly global kind of public utilities, belong to the world, and you've got to get the younger generation, who, by the way, are the ones that are thinking about climate all day long, because they're the ones going to be living with it much more than I am, for example. So I think that's the secret here. Don't be afraid to step in and go, sorry, you're not, that's not your thing. You can't have it both ways. You can't say no one owns it, but we're the ones who are outraged if you suggest changing it, which is sometimes what you see. So step in there, and then don't read the comments on social media. Free anyway. So don't just get to work, and don't get too hung up in the 10. You got to look out 10 years, not 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, I would agree that there's a lot of R&D work that could come out of universities to do this kind of research, core research around new types of blockchains that are actually carbon negative in their very incentive models and their consensus algorithms, and to be able to build not just at that core layer, but all the other stuff on top. So more ways in which we could incentivize and make money by saving the environment. So there's also a lot of, it's not just the coders, but it's also the business designers and everyone else who's thinking about how to make this technology relevant and useful. So it's pretty excited to work with colleges and universities on that regard.
Fantastic. And following up on that, would also love to hear your thoughts. More endowments are looking at investing in crypto and at the same time are committing to net zero portfolios. Do you think they could be an influential voice to change the code, and how would they do that?
Yeah, Fanny, you want to go? Or
No, go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Actually, the environment has changed tremendously over the last couple of years. It used to be, if you go back to like 2016, and Fenny has watched all this stuff, I'm sure, 2016, 2017, the SegWit battles. It was like these infamous battles within the Bitcoin community, for example. Not just, you see it in a lot of these protocols, but where they're fighting over little changes, right? And it's kind of like this inside baseball thing where, these super committed, super brilliant, but kind of, libertarian, a little bit on the outskirts of society, fighting it out amongst each other. And now, though, with crypto so mainstream, what's really driving when you get into trillions of dollars, it is the endowments, right? It's retirement funds, it's these institutions. And that's just a fundamentally different beast, because to your point, they are also committed to climate goals, and they have ESG goals, and they cannot get away from that. So I think as they become aware of, hey, this is a problem, well then, look, you got to step up and do something about it. Step one would be just saying, hey, this is a problem, right? Because right now the problem, there's a lot of greenwashing going on. Unfortunately, the industry itself is pumping out a lot of nonsense. And literally, get this, right? So here, Bitcoin chewing up 130 trillion watt hours, right? And you have people in the community writing reports saying, oh, no, all this use of energy, it's the key to a renewable future. Come on, no climate person believes that, right? But the problem is then people that don't know and just kind of repeat that. So step one is recognizing it. Step two would be encouraging, again, these university students to come up with something that, and to Fanny's point, you can have the incentives that incentivize helping the problem, not hurting the problem. Man, if you get there, that's the golden key right there.
Yeah, Chris, as you were talking about the libertarian aspect of the Bitcoiners, and I think, well, then subject to market conditions, the endowments can come and say, well, we're not going to go and put our money in Bitcoin if they continue this way, right? We want to put our money in other types of digital currencies that have the right values alignment baked into the core of what they're doing. And if they don't change, then they'll go by the wayside of what the market demands. And if the market demands responsibility, right, then there'll be less demand for Bitcoin. So that's, those are the rules that I think they can agree are rules that they abide by. So either they shift to what endowments are saying, hey, this is what people's values are, or they don't, and then slowly become less relevant.
It's 100% true. And the other thing, it'll be interesting to see when Ethereum switches, right? Because, if you see a lot of institutions, endowments switching to Ethereum, and Ethereum's market cap becomes greater than Bitcoin, that would be a watershed moment. That might be a wake-up call.
Yeah. And fundamentally different is that people are also building applications on top of Ethereum, but you don't typically do that with the Bitcoin blockchain. So it doesn't really function as a kind of utility layer for all kinds of different transactions. It's really like, we're Bitcoin, we're our own thing. These are our beliefs,
That's totally right. Yeah.
And we have just a few minutes left here, so I'm going to try and bundle some of the remaining questions, and would love if you each just want to pull out anything from here that you'd like to speak to. One question is asking about how many stakeholders in the cryptocurrency space are talking about and advocating for climate stewardship, and where can participants find that information? And there's also interest in the audience to hold Bitcoin more accountable for emissions. So would love to hear any calls to action that you may both have in closing.
Yeah, so there are a lot of people that are trying to do the right thing, using crypto, for example, setting up more transparent offset markets, because offset markets are a disaster right now. It's not a market, it's a flea market, right? It doesn't really work. But I think there's a notion that technology could really help that. Also kind of showing where emissions are in the supply chain of all things we consume. That's something blockchains could do very uniquely. So some really good stuff going on there. You might want to look up a group called the Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI. They're doing some great work on that. Energy Web, another group that's associated with RMI, doing great work. And then another advocacy group devoted to artists, where I think is doing some good work, called Arts Help. And they have a neat program called the Conscious Crypto Creators Program. It's for artists that want to get involved with NFTs, but not in a way that hurts the climate. And then the final thing, holding accountable. Yeah, I think it is through programs. Greenpeace, again, is doing some great work. The ex-head of the Sierra Club is running that campaign, Change the Code, Not the Climate. If you search that, there's a website that will come up on where you can sign up and get active in this crypto climate debate.
Yeah, so to add to that, you might have heard of something called ReFi. So instead of DeFi, it's regenerative finance. And that's been kind of quite interesting to see a community built around that idea. So, for example, carbon credits could be something that is a digital asset. And one of the benefits is that you're incentivizing liquidity now in a market. And to Chris's point, currently it does feel more like a flea market than a true market for commodities. And carbon should be a standard kind of commodity that we can trade and incentivize. So what I'm also very excited about is with these currencies, these digital currencies that are being issued, could they be backed in part by carbon credits? Could they be backed by other types of regenerative outcomes? So just thinking about, the trillions of dollars we keep in bank deposits, could some of that be converted into these types of whether it's community currencies or stable coins that are backed in part by local assets, locally produced grains, wheat, carbon credits, because also farms can generate carbon credits if they engage in certain types of practices of sequestering carbon in the soil. So we can also incentivize and create additional revenue models for independent farmers and so forth. So I think that's what I'm kind of really excited about in terms of that Cambrian explosion that Chris spoke about, all these ways in which we can bake carbon reduction and climate incentives into how we already conduct our day-to-day financial lives or other types of activities.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. We are unfortunately at time. There are so many more great questions and a lot of really supportive comments in the chat. Thanking you both for your time and expertise and just great insights on this topic. Really appreciate you joining, and to everyone in the audience for joining us for this closing keynote. There are some great resources in the chat as well, so definitely check those out to learn more about Chris and Fenny's work.
Right.
Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Fanny.
having us. Thank you, Chris.